Yeah, hi everybody. Dr. Jason W. Morrison, theologist, New South Wales, Australia. I've got another story. It's an update on this 19,300 Jehovah Witnesses that have been in trouble over their objection to military draft. Now this story says, and this has just come in from the New York Times, South Korea must offer alternatives to military draft, court rules. And here they are. Now, they're all Jehovah Witnesses. It says the majority is Jehovah Witnesses. They're all Jehovah Witnesses, right? Now, look at the media feeding on this. Activists and conscientious objectors during a rally outside the Constitutional Court in Seoul, South Korea on Thursday. 28th of... this came out on the 28th of June, apparently. Anyway, let's have a look at it. Seoul, South Korea. South Korea's Constitutional Court on Thursday ordered the government to introduce civilian forms of service for conscientious objectors, sparing hundreds of young men from going to prison each year for refusing to serve in the military for reasons of conscience or religious beliefs. In a landmark decision, the court ruled that Article 5 of the country's Military Service Act is unconstitutional because it does not offer such alternative services. Gave the government and the parliament until the end of next year to revise the law. South Korea has prosecuted more young women in conscientious objection, almost all of them Jehovah Witnesses, than any other country, and it is one of the few that treat it as a crime without offering a different form of national service. Amnesty International says there have been more than 19,300 South Korean conscientious objectors who have gone to prison since 1953, and the Korean War ended in a truce. The state can no longer delay resolving this problem, the court said in its 7-6-3 ruling, which held that Article 5 violated conscientious objectors' freedom of conscience. The Defence Ministry said Thursday that it would honour the ruling by introducing alternative services as soon as possible. Possible forms of service that have been suggested including in homeless shelters, prisons and hospitals, or as police officers or firefighters. Well, they won't work as police officers or firefighters, I don't think. All South Korean men who pass physical and mental eligibility tests are required to spend 21 to 24 months in the military between the ages of 18 and 28. The Military Service Act calls up to 3 years in prison for those who refuse to serve, and that's why they're being in prison, these other people. Some 214 Jehovah Witnesses are serving 18-month prison sentences for violating the law, and more than 950 others are on trial. All were expected to be freed. The Jehovah Witnesses, these Jehovah Witnesses, they're a nuisance. In South Korea, called the decision the beginning of an end to the long and harsh pain felt by its young male members and their families. Well, if you don't want to serve your country, don't live in it. That's my opinion. If you don't want to serve your country, don't live in it. Get out. Go somewhere where you can get away with this cowardry. I'm happy that I finally got a ruling that respects my freedom of conscience, said Kim Hyun, 25, a Jehovah Witness who was one of the 28 conscientious objectors whose petition led to the court's ruling. Well, it still goes on. South Korea's border with North Korea is the most heavily armed frontier in the world, and the two countries are technically still at war, though a peace treaty to formally end the Korean War has been proposed amid this year's flurry of diplomacy over the North's nuclear arms program. North Korean men typically serve in the country's military for a decade. During the decades after the Korean War, when the South was ruled by military dictators, government officials raided Jehovah Witnesses' meeting halls to haul draft-age men away. And fair enough. When they refused to take up arms, they were beaten like punching bags, according to a Presidential Commission's report in 2008. Now, this is again the grievance that the Jehovah Witnesses are causing in government circles and in community circles. Few spoke out for them. Mainstream churches viewed them as a cult, which they are, and the threat from North Korea led many South Koreans to regard military service almost as a sacred right. The Commission attributed the deaths of 5 Jehovah Witnesses between 1975 and 1985 to beatings and torture that were routine among boot camp instructors and military police officers who dealt with conscientious objectors, because they'd had enough. It reported incidences of starvation, water torture, and solitary cells smaller than a telephone booth where Jehovah Witnesses were forced to stand for days without sleeping. Such practices are long gone, but Jehovah Witnesses and other conscientious objectors have spent time in prison and say their job opportunities have been seriously limited. Oh, goodness gracious. I refuse to pick up a rifle. I renounce all forms of violence, said Hong Jiong-hun, a conscientious objector who is not a Jehovah Witness and who was also among the petitioners heard by the court. Today's ruling was a strong message against punishing those who risk going to prison in order to protect peace from violence. A handful of South Korean conscientious objectors have obtained refugee status in Canada, France, and Australia. Don't bring them to Australia. We don't want them here. If they're not gonna fight for this country, we don't want them here. We've had enough of the Jehovah Witnesses here anyway. The United Nations Human Rights Committee has repeatedly condemned South Korea for violating conscientious objectors' freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. The Constitutional Court ruled the Military Service Act constitutional in 2004 and again in 2011, saying that the constitutional right to freedom of conscience did not overrule the need for national defence, but the country's attitudes have been changing. As a candidate last year, President Moon Jae-in promised to consider introducing alternative service to conscientious objectors. Since 2011, lower court judges have declared 85 conscientious objectors not guilty, though all of the acquittals were appealed by prosecutors. The prosecutors want them in trouble. Many still argue that conscientious objectors must be punished for the sake of national security, and that the option of alternative civilian service will lead many young men to evade the draft under the pretext of ethical principles. Exactly right. Why don't you just leave the country if you don't want to serve in the military? Exactly, shouted a few protesters in front of the court on Thursday, and that's my sentiment. If you don't want to defend your country, don't live in it. Get out. The court said in its ruling that if conscientious objectors are carefully screened, their numbers will never be big enough to cause difficulties in filing ranks of them. That's irrelevant. Totally irrelevant. It is also said that evading conscription will remain a crime. Now, I'm going to come back to this. The court did not... Now, just hang on a sec. You said that, see this, the court said in its ruling that if conscientious objectors are carefully screened, their numbers will never be big enough to cause difficulties in filing ranks in the military. Now, I'm going to pause here and I'm going to bring up a clip of a Middle Eastern woman confronting a Muslim woman over how it only takes a couple of people to destroy many. The court did not say how much time conscientious objectors should spend in civilian service. Kim Young-kil, a retired Army colonel who leads the Just Military Human Rights Institute, a civic group that has been campaigning for the punishment of draft dodgers, said that alternative service should be long and rigorous enough to ensure that it is a fair substitute for serving in the military, and I agree. Regardless, the ruling was a hard-won victory for the Jehovah Witnesses. Because of our faith, we have been treated like criminals. No, because of your cowardness, you have become criminals, said Kim Mi-yeon, a member of the faith who served in prison from 2012 to 2013. I'm overwhelmed that with this ruling, an era is coming to a close. Well, it is to a point, but not completely. This is Dr. Jason W. Morrison, theologist. Bye for now. Now, I'm just going to add some supplement footage here. The objectors to the need to go to national service are saying it's only minority, and that justifies the fact that it's not going to do any harm if they don't go. But I disagree with that, because minorities can have tremendous influence. So here's a video clip of a woman, Muslim woman, that's asked the question to this lady. She's brilliant. I'll put it on and you can go from there.
Peace to you all. My name is Saba Ahmed. I'm a law student at American University. I am here to ask you a simple question. I know that we portray Islam and all Muslims as bad, but there's 1.8 billion Muslim followers of Islam. We have 8 million plus Muslim Americans in this country, and I don't see them represented here. But my question is, how can we fight an ideological war with weapons? How can we ever end this war? The jihadist ideology that you talk about, it's an ideology. How can you ever win this thing if you don't address it ideologically?
Great question. I am so glad you're here, and I am so glad you brought that up because it gives us an opportunity to answer. What I find so amazing is since the beginning of this panel, which we are here about Benghazi attack against our people, not one person mentioned Muslims. We are here against Islam, or we're launching war against Muslims. We are here to discuss how 4 Americans died and what our government is doing. We were not here to bash Muslims. You were the one who brought up the issue about most Muslims, not us. And since you brought it up, allow me to elaborate with my answer. There are 1.2 billion Muslims in the world today. Of course, not all of them are radicals. The majority of them are peaceful people. The radicals are estimated to be between 15 to 25%, according to all intelligence services around the world. That leaves 75% of them peaceful people. But when you look at 15 to 25% of the world Muslim population, you're looking at 180 million to 300 million people dedicated to the destruction of Western civilization. That is as big of the United States. So why should we worry about the radicals, 15 to 25%? Because it is the radicals that kill. Because it is the radicals that behead and massacre. When you look throughout history, when you look at all the lessons of history, most Germans were peaceful. Yet the Nazis drove the agenda. And as a result, 60 million people died. Almost 14 million in concentration camps. 6 million were Jews. The peaceful majority were irrelevant. When you look at Russia, most Russians were peaceful as well. Yet the Russians were able to kill 20 million people. The peaceful majority were irrelevant. When you look at China, for example, most Chinese were peaceful as well. Yet the Chinese were able to kill 70 million people. The peaceful majority were irrelevant. When you look at Japan prior to World War II, most Japanese were peaceful as well. Yet Japan was able to butcher its way across Southeast Asia, killing 12 million people, mostly killed with bayonets and shovels. The peaceful majority were irrelevant. On September 11th in the United States, we had 2.3 million Arab Muslims living in the United States. It took 19 hijackers, 19 radicals to bring America down to its knees, destroy the World Trade Center, attack the Pentagon, and kill almost 3,000 Americans that day. The peaceful majority were irrelevant. So for all our powers of reasons and us talking about moderate and peaceful Muslims, I'm glad you're here. But where are the others speaking out? And since you are the only Muslim representative, send the applause till the end. And since you're the only Muslim representative in here, you took the limelight instead of speaking about why our government, and I assume, are you an American? You're an American citizen. So as an American citizen, you sat in this room and instead of standing up and saying a question or asking something about our 4 Americans that died and what our government is doing to correct the problem, you stood there to make a point about peaceful, moderate Muslims. I wish you brought 10 with you to question about how we can hold our government responsible. It is time we take political correctness and throw it in the garbage where it belongs and start calling it.
Now, on the one hand, you see that the Muslims are active aggressive. They destroy things and they wreck things. Jehovah Witnesses, when it comes to this sort of stuff, are passive aggressive. They won't get involved and they won't contribute. So you've got the active aggressive and you've got the passive aggressive, which to me are equally harmful. This is Dr. Jason W. Morrison, theologist, New South Wales, Australia. Bye for now. Yeah, Dr. Jason Morrison, theologist again. I just want to say thank you for watching the videos, and I hope you got plenty of self-rediscovery and freedom out of it. If you watched it on YouTube, please share or like, maybe even comment. If you watched it on Facebook, like, comment, share. But most of all, get out and live. This isn't a rehearsal. You've got a one-off life. Don't let your loyalty and your faithfulness blind you to the life that you should be experiencing. Till the next video, thank you for watching and bye for now.